off the Pacific had a habit of arriving before the storm. It carried the low roar of distant swells and the tang of diesel, the kind of smell that sank into the cuffs of a uniform and never quite left. On the SS Atlantic border, the air also carried the metronome of steam, the steady clack of container locks, the groan of the deck in a cold swell, the murmur of generators that never slept. Ethan Caldwell used to find comfort in that industrial heartbeat. Tonight it sounded like a warning. He walked the portside catwalk with a flashlight tucked in his armpit and a clipboard strapped to his forearm. The beam skated over shipping labels and rusted bolts, over stenciled numbers that had been repainted so many times they looked like fossils. Row 10, Stack 5, Bay 3. He did not need to read the map. The coordinates were engraved into habit. The matte black container waited there, a negative space among boxy colors, no carrier logo, no routing sticker, only a pentagon sealed like a scar that had refused to fade. It had waited there for 3 years of cycles, and for as long as he had worked the night shift, it had never left. Vault 13 did not collect spray like the others. The paint repelled salt the way skin rejects a splinter. Its edges were too clean. Its padlocks were titanium, their faces unmarred except for the tiny, precise scuffs left by keys that never left the captain's pocket. The chains were heavier than the ship-needed braided steel that glinted dark blue when the deck light struck it. In the log, the box was a line of symbols and codes. In the crew's mouth, it was a myth with a number. Ethan touched the chain with 2 fingers, as if to remind himself he was not afraid of it. The metal was cold enough to burn. He withdrew his hand and wiped the sting on his jacket. The wind cut sharper. Out past the rails, the ocean was a broad shape with ridges like the backs of sleeping animals. The storm had not arrived, but it was making promises. "You're early on the inspection," a voice said behind him. Ethan turned and lifted the beam. Captain Alina Navarro stepped into the light and raised a hand to shade her eyes. The rain had not started, but her hat brim was already beaded with moisture from the wet air. She wore her usual expression of patient severity, as if the sea had taught her long ago that everything could be endured except a sloppy manifest. "Barometer fell a hair," Ethan said. "Figured I'd make a pass before it starts pinching." Navarro's eyes traveled to the container and stayed there, measuring the chains the way a nurse measures a pulse. "Make your notes," she said. "Don't linger." "I never do. Never did, at least not in daylight when other eyes were on it." At night, the human mind wanted to fill the silence. Ethan had learned to keep his curiosity folded away like a letter he wasn't ready to send. It was safer that way. Men who asked too much about the black container found other ships, or no ships at all. He checked the padlocks by touch, read the serial numbers into the handle, watched the tiny green dial wink each entry. The same numbers, the same cold, the same absence. He wrote secure on the margin of the inked driving. Above him the crane stood like idle giraffes, necks fixed, cables barely signed. In the distance the navigation lights made a broken necklace across the water. Caldwell, the captain's voice was lower now running. He stepped closer and kept his eyes on the container because it felt like a neutral place to look. "Ma'am, after your pass, stop by the bridge. We have a reroute on the Seattle leg. Weather." "Understood." Ethan swallowed the question and tasted salt. He had learned to file questions with the same ease he filed manifests, by date, by risk, by the likelihood that answers did more harm than good. Navarro waited a heartbeat, as if giving him room to misstep, then turned away, her boots loud on the steam. When she was gone, the container seemed to exhale. Ethan stood alone on the catwalk with the sense that something had been staring back at him, and had only now remembered to blink. He finished the pass, on the main deck he found Lucas crammed halfway inside an access panel, the lower half of the mechanic protruding from a nest of cables as if the ship had tried to lead him and lost interest halfway through. Lucas's voice came muffled. "If you're planning to tell me the starboard genset sounds like it's chewing growl of a sailor, I'm already in its throat." "You read minds now," Ethan said. "I read faces, and you've got the face of a man listening for a rattle." Lucas slid out, wiping grease on a rag already beyond sailing. He tapped the panel with the back of his wrench. "I can keep her purring, but the storm will want a chorus. Captain says reroute after Seattle. Navarro stood with her hands in the pockets of her peacoat, the coat tailored to her posture so precisely that it looked like it had grown there. "Your route uploaded," the first mate said without looking up from his key. Navarro nodded, then tilted her head toward Ethan. "You're dismissed, Caldwell. Try to sleep before it hits." "I sleep like a buoy," he said. "Then try to sink." He smiled because that was how one answered Navarro's jokes, as if they were orders. He left the bridge and made for the crew passage. On the stairwell, a photo was bolted to the wall under plexiglass. The warden in calmer water, her deck bright, her cranes lowered like the arms of a dancer in a bow. He had walked past that photo 100 times without looking closely. Tonight he noticed that row 10, stack 5, bay 3 was a dark hole even in the sun. His cabin was a narrow rectangle with a porthole that showed the ocean as a slice of moving graphite. He set the clipboard on the desk and opened the small locker that served as both closet and memory box. A folded letter sat on the shelf atop a pair of spare socks. The letter had seen the corners of 3 apartments and 2 ships. The handwriting was square and old-fashioned, the kind that looked like it belonged on the spine of a book, not an envelope. He had not opened it in years. It was addressed to his mother, not to him, but his mother had given it to him on a January afternoon when the sky hung low, and she had said, "You should know where you come from." He touched the envelope, then closed the locker and spun the latch. Routine, superstition. He lay down without undressing, boots on, the ship's heartbeat on his spine. Sleep came in slices. The storm arrived in between them. He woke to a tilt and a thud and the sound of rain like handfuls of nails thrown to the hull. The porthole flashed, then went dark. He swung his legs off the bunk and felt the deck roll under him like a slow animal. The clock read 23:41. The inspection window was technically closed, but storms move the rules around the way wind moves curtains. He took his flashlight and the handheld recorder and went back into the passage, down the stairs, across the trembling deck. The rain discovered every seam in his jacket and pushed through. He kept his head down and his hand on the rail. The catwalk to port felt narrower than it had in dusk. The sea hurled itself at the hull in heavy palms. When the ship climbed, his stomach fell. When it fell, his teeth clicked. The containers groaned as their bindings flexed. Steel sang in a key older than language. Row 10, stack 5, bay 3. The beam found the matte black surface and stopped as if the paint absorbed photons. The chains trembled like taut instruments. Ethan set the recorder on the catwalk and knelt to check the lower hasps. They looked sound, but something else did not. The right hand waterfall sat just shy of true, as if a breath of air had gotten between the gasket and the frame. He stared. The gap was not visible so much as inferred. The way one sees a hairline crack in a windshield, not because of the crack itself, but because of the way the rain decides to change direction. The water ran sideways along the seam and then downward, a deviation slight as a tremor in a hand. Ethan leaned closer. The ship rolled, the beam skittered, and the gap seemed to inhale. The smell hit him first, a salt that was not ocean, metallic and sweet, the perfume of a hospital corridor after the linen carts had been rolled away. Under it, a sour note like meat-choked tide pools. He swallowed and tasted copper. Something moved inside the vault. Not the reassuring shuffle of fear, but pressure, the way air moves in a lung before a cough. It pressed at the door from the other side and released. The chain creaked. The padlock gave a single, delicate click like a glass settling on a table. "Hello," Ethan said, then immediately hated it. It felt childish, a question formed by a brain that wanted to pretend it was waking from a nap instead of walking into a nightmare. He lifted the beam to the narrow place between door and frame. The light touched nothing, and then a red eye opened. It was not an iris or a pupil so much as a geometry of light, a circle inside a circle, a cold ring by embers, and he could feel the heat of it in his face, although he knew that was not how it worked. The eye looked at him. It did not widen in surprise or narrow in suspicion. It simply looked, and in that looking Ethan felt something open inside himself like a file he had not known was in his mind. Pages flipped. A childhood kitchen with a yellow table and a broken radio. A hospital waiting room with green chairs. His mother's hand was in his pain followed. still starving. Policeman. Ethan jerked back so hard his shoulder hit the captain grate. The flashlight scraped the grate and spun light across rings and chains of black paint until it found the eye again. The rain fell to mist, and for a heartbeat the ship seemed to hold its breath. Ethan turned to go, telling himself that the man of measure walls and nothing else. Behind him, deep within the vault, something shifted with the exhaust pump. The chain inside and sleep. The silver chain gave a soft, unmistakable ding. He did not look back. He only counted his steps and tried to remember how not to run. Vault 13, Part 2. The morning after the storm felt like a false reprieve. Seattle's port cranes moved with the deliberation of tired giants, offloading containers in rhythm with the gulls that circled above. The SS Atlantic Orton looked ordinary again, but for Ethan Caldwell, the deck seemed to carry echoes of the red eye he had seen. Every sound of metal on metal suggested chains under stress. Every roll of a dolly across the catwalk suggested movement behind Vault 13's sealed doors. Captain Alina Navarro summoned him to the bridge. The weather reroute was finished, cargo tallies in order, and yet her expression had the severity of a court summons. She dismissed the mate with a curt nod and closed the door before speaking. Sid Caldwell. He did, across the chart table, new coordinates gleamed. Navarro remained standing, hands clasped behind her back like a woman on the edge of confession. What you saw last night, she began. I don't know what I saw. Ethan's throat was raw, but the marks were there this morning. Navarro's eyes narrowed. Marks. Written on the paint, 4 lines, day 1095, still awake, still starving, policeman. The captain exhaled through her nose, not surprised but recognition. Of course, she murmured that more firmly. You will say nothing of this to the crew, not to train, not to anyone. I'll understand. I can just. You will, because this ship does not carry explanations, Paul. It carries orders. Her words should have lingered, but silence hung instead, demanding honesty. Ethan took it as permission. That voice in my head, it sounded human, like it knew me. Navarro's lips tightened. It should. The vault's occupant is family. Ethan's pulse lurched. Family. Your grandmother, Lieutenant Commander Sarah Caldwell. The world reeled. He had known her only through a folded letter and silence at family dinners. She had been Navy, classified, lost at sea. Now she was alive, or something that resembled alive, chained inside a black container for 3 years of voyages, and perhaps 60 years before that. You're lying, Ethan said, but it came out weak. I wish I were. Navarro sat at last, his shoulders stiff. In 1963, Project Air was began at AR oversight. Genetic splicing of deep-sea creatures, extraterrestrial samples from Roswell forward. The aim was an indestructible soldier. Sarah Caldwell volunteered. Ethan's stomach turned. Volunteered. They believed it. Believed it would end wars before they started, instead of creating subjects. Only 30 survived phase 2. Your grandmother was subject 9. Indestructible, yes, but also cursed. Their bodies do not die, do not rest. They hunger endlessly. DAR buried them in vaults and called it containment. He stared at the captain, willing her to flinch, but her voice was steady as ballads. Every 14 days, this ship carries subject 9 up and down the coast. DAR calls it a logistical rotation. I call it purgatory. Ethan remembered the letter's warnings. If they tell you I am dead, do not mourn. If they tell you I am alive, do not rejoice. Why tell me now? He asked. Because you already know, and because the vault is weakened. They descended to the maintenance bay, where Lucas Tran hunched over 12 charts. Navarro spread the readings from last night, pointing to the varying spikes. Lucas frowned. Steel doesn't flex like that unless it's being worked from inside. Ethan said nothing. Navarro's eyes flicked to him, warning silence, but Lucas was not blind. You two know something, he said. What you know is enough, Navarro rejoined. That night the ship rolled south toward San Francisco. Rain returned, soft at first. Ethan stood his watch on the port catwalk. The container seemed to drink the darkness around it. He thought of his grandmother's name, of her signature, Sarah. He whispered it into the wind. The vault responded with a thrum in his bones. A voice spilled into his skull, cracked but lucid. Ethan. He clutched the rail. Grandmother. They lied to me. They lied to all of us. 60 years Ethan, still awake, still starving. Images flooded him. A sterile lab, tanks of brine, men, white coats. Sarah strapped to a table, her veins lit with bioluminescence. The terror of drowning without water. The rage of hunger without death. He fell to his knees, gasping. Why me? He whispered. Because you carry my name. Because you carry my blood. Because you can end this. Chains rattled as if in agreement. Above, thunder rolled like distant artillery. Ethan stumbled below, searching for Navarro. He found her on the bridge, studying sonar returns. Her expression sharpened when she saw him. What happened? She spoke to me, he said. Sarah, Subject 9, my grandmother. Navarro shut her eyes briefly. Then containment is failing faster than expected. Lucas entered behind him, wiping grease. Failing. You two are keeping secrets and I'm done guessing. What's inside that vault? Navarro hesitated, then exhaled. The truth will out, one way or another. Subject 9 is Lieutenant Commander Sarah Caldwell, Ethan's grandmother. Lucas blinked. Jesus Christ. Not quite, Navarro said. Closer to Lazarus, but unwilling. The mechanic slumped into the chair. So what's our play? Strengthen chains every port until Judgment Day. Ethan's voice cracked. She's in pain, 60 years, you can't just leave her. Navarro's gaze was granted. We leave her, or the world suffers worse. But the decision did not stay theirs. At dawn, alarms blared. Padlock sensors tripped. Navarro, Ethan, and Lucas sprinted to bay 3. The auxiliary chain glowed like a drawn bowstring. Letters scrawled across the vault's face, fresh and ragged. 30 others still alive, hidden, find them. Lucas swore, it's writing back now. Ethan reached toward the marks, but Navarro caught his wrist. Don't. It's her, he said. She's trying to warn us. She's trying to lure you, Navarro countered. Don't confuse the two. But Ethan could not shake the certainty in Sarah's words. 30 others. Phase 2. If they were alive, suffering as she was. DAR had buried more than one secret. That evening, dockside in San Francisco, DAR agents boarded. Their insignia was discreet, gray suits, clipped voices. At their head was Dr. Rachel Voss, her face pale as paper. She demanded the logs, the torque charts, and private conference with Navarro. Ethan watched from the mess as Lucas muttered, "Here comes the cleanup crew." Dr. Voss emerged hours later, her eyes hollow. She gave Ethan a glance heavy with unspoken knowledge. Then she was gone, the agents with her, leaving the vault still chained. The ship still bound to its cycle. Ethan returned to his cabin. The letter lay waiting. He unfolded it again, tracing Sarah's signature. For the first time, he believed she might not only be alive, but watching him through steel. logs were falsified. The official record spoke only of pork minor cosmetic abrasions. But the crew knew something odd was shifting. Rumors slithered between the evenings that the black container sang at night, that shadows pulled around it, that the youngest deckhand had seen a hand press against the steel from the inside. Men avoided the port catwalk unless ordered. Lucas Tran confronted Ethan in the mess one night, his mug of coffee clattered against the table. "Tell me straight, what the hell is in that box?" Ethan hesitated, the lie balanced on his tongue, but Sarah's voice echoed in his skull and cracked. He chose the truth. "My grandmother." Lucas laughed once bitter. "Hell of a family heirloom. She was Navy, part of the program. They changed her. She can't die." Lucas stared, the joke was all. "Jesus, you're serious." "I wish I was." They sat in silence, listening to the groan of the hull. Finally, Lucas said, "If she's alive in there, she's not going to stay in there forever." The breach came 3 nights later. It began with a klaxon at 02:17. Ethan bolted upright in his bunk, heart hammering. The alarm shrieked through the ship, joined by the thud of boots and shouting orders. He grabbed his jacket and ran. On the port catwalk, Navarro opened the security cruise to football 13. The auxiliary chain stretched upon the motion. The steel doors bulged out from the wood. With each pulse came sound like ribs cracking. Navarro armed orders, reinforced additional legs, welding an aperture responsible for the torch's flare. The men worked with frantic precision, slapping steel braces across the seams. But the bulge only grew, and through the gap came the eye crimson, burning, fixed on Ethan. Ethan, the voice hammered his skull. 60 years, please. He staggered, clutching the rig. Navarro grabbed his arm. "Don't listen. I can't shut her out." His voice shook. "She's in pain. She'll kill us all if she gets out," Navarro said. "That thing is my grandmother." The vault shut, the old switch loose. The bulge of the steam devastated outward gravity on deck. One of the security crews screamed, chicken snapped across his chest, hurling him against the rig. His body slung and breathless. The others rose. Navarro raised a whisper and aimed at the ceiling as if orders were loud. "Back, everything back." The little pressure ceased. The vault stayed behind the door. In the silence, the pressure was swallowed into the steel. Hard, watch. VAR still hands. Do not trust. By dawn, the warden had an escort. A gray cutter with PAR markings pulled alongside. Crew in black uniforms visible on deck. Navarro's jaw tightened as she studied them through binoculars. "They weren't scheduled," she muttered. "They must have intercepted our distress mail." Ethan's stomach nodded. The letters on the wall burned in his mind. Trust. VAR agents were officials. At their head was Agent Marcus Holt, tall, sleek, with a small, sharp, curved glass. He carried a briefcase on his wrist. "Captain Navarro," he said sweetly. "We'll take it from you." "This is my ship," Navarro replied. "And my crew." The voice sounded quiet. "And our property," he gestured at all 13. "Step aside." Ethan felt Sarah's presence whisper in his skull. "Not them, not again." Navarro stood firm, contained and taking his collar. All advantage must be good. Wood's eyes flicked to Ethan and leaned. "You must be called." Ethan stiffened. "And you are." "Someone who knows your grandmother." Holt came closer, voice low. "She's not pleading for release. She's baiting you. That thing in there hasn't been Sarah Caldwell for decades. Don't mistake the voice for the woman." Ethan met his gaze. "And what about the 30 others?" For the first time, Holt's smile faltered. His eyes flicked to Navarro. Loose tongue was dangerous. Navarro stepped between them. "You have your orders, but this ship follows mine." Tension coiled like wire. Lucas hovered nearby, hand clenched on a wrench as if it were a weapon. The crew watched from a distance, pretending to busy themselves but listening to every word. Hope finally nodded. Very well, but understand this. If Vault 13 breaches, we will scuttle this vessel with everyone aboard. That's not a threat. That's protocol. He turned and strode away, his agents trailed. The air seemed to curdle in his wake. That night, Ethan could not sleep. He wandered the deck, listening to the Pacific whistle and steel. He ended where he always did, the catwalk. The vault loomed, chains groaned. He pressed his hand to the cold steel. "Grandma," he whispered, "tell me what to do." The reply seared into him, exposed them. The files, the recordings, hidden in the captain's safe. Navarro knows. Lucas can help. Do it before PAR silences you. Ethan staggered back, breath ragged. If it was true, then proof existed. Records of Project Erebus, locked aboard the ship. Proof PAR were able to suppress. He turned and nearly collided with Navarro. She had approached silently, a shadow against shadows. Her eyes studied his face. She spoke to him again. "Yes," Ethan admitted. "She says there's evidence in your safe." Navarro did not flinch. "Then you already know too much." Silence stretched between them before only let the ship's groan. Finally, Navarro exhaled. "I didn't want this for you, but she's right. The files are real, and PAR will do anything to keep them buried." She pressed something into his hand, a small encrypted drive. "This is a copy. Keep it hidden. If we don't make it to port, get it out by any means. Understand?" Ethan swallowed hard and nodded. "Good," Navarro said. She glanced at the vault. The faint letters were already scrawled. "Time short." The sequel. The chain strangled. And Ethan moved the voyages turned toward a reckoning none of them could avoid. As dawn came to the horizon, whose colors, warding cloud toward those angels. The vault loomed heavier than the ship itself, a secret that refused to stay secret. Ethan stood at the rail, encrypted drive burning in his pocket, his grandmother's voice in his skull, PAR's threat echoing in his ears. The countdown had begun. Tension did not fade in the day. If anything, the sight of Lowe's angels creeping closer from charts made it worse. DAR's cutter stood shadowed, gray against gray, silent and patient. The crew moved with unease, whispers following Ethan wherever he went. They knew something was wrong, even if they could not name it. Lucas cornered Ethan near the engine bay. "I saw Holt speaking with two of his agents. They're planning something." Ethan frowned, scuttling. "Maybe we're taking the vault off our hands before port." Lucas lowered his voice. "We can't let them. If what you said is true, if your grandmother knows where the others are, we need her." Ethan thought of Sarah's voice, cracked by thirst. Finally, he nodded. "Then we need proof. Navarro gave me something, an encrypted drive. It has records." Lucas's eyes widened. "Then that's our lifeline. Keep it hidden. If DAR finds out." The ship lurched suddenly, throwing him against the bulkhead. Alarms wailed. Ethan's stomach dropped. He sprinted for the catwalk. Vault 13 pulsed like a heartbeat, steel bulging, surge. Chains snapped one by one, ricocheting across the deck. The air turned heavy, oppressive. Crew scattered, shouting. Navarro appeared, pistol in one hand, radio in the other, marking orders. Reinforced containment. The vault doors opened out with glowing cracks along the seams. Through them spilled light, scarlet and honey. Ethan's skull filled with Sarah's voice. "They're coming." Over the silence. Cheers. Navarro seized his shoulder. "If it breaches, PAR will sink us. You understand? They'll torch everyone." Ethan's breath came back. "We can't let them. We have to leave the truth before we can bury it again." Navarro's gaze was hard, but there was fear under it. "Then do it fast." They retreated to the comms room, Lucas at the console. He hooked the encrypted drive into the system, fingers flying over keys. Files spilled across the monitor. Medical charts, video logs, names and faces of subjects 1 through 30. Grainy footage of men and women screaming in tanks, bodies half-lit with alien bioluminescence. Sarah Caldwell strapped to a table, her eyes wide, veins glowing like rivers of fire. Ethan's stomach churned, but he pressed on. Send it to multiple relays, encrypted servers, as far and wide as possible. Lucas nodded, already on it. The door slammed open. Agent Holt stood there, weapon drawn, agents at his back, step away from the console. Navarro drew her sidearm, placing herself between them, over my dead body. That can be arranged, Holt said coldly. He flicked his eyes to Ethan. Think, boy, that thing in the vault isn't your grandmother anymore. She's manipulating you. Do you want to unleash that on the world? She's already been unleashed, Ethan shot back. DAR did that 60 years ago. Holt's jaw tightened. Last warning. The console beeped. Lucas grinned despite the gun leveled at him. Too late, files are away. Holt's face darkened. Then none of you leave that ship. Gunfire erupted. Chaos tore through the warden. Navarro returned fire, shouting for the crew to scatter. Ethan dove behind a console as bullets sparked off steel. Lucas yanked him toward the maintenance hatch. Go. They scrambled through the crawl space, the roar of gunfire muffled but unrelenting. The ship groaned as Vault 13 slammed against its chains, each impact like thunder. Ethan's ears rang with Sarah's cries. Ethan, blood of mine, free me. They emerged near the catwalk. The vault bulged and one door bent inward. Light bled out, casting the deck crimson. Holt's men stormed after them, weapons raised. Navarro appeared again, blood streaking her sleeve. Get off the deck, she barked. But Ethan stood rooted, staring at the vault. His grandmother's voice swelled. Do not let them take me. Do not let them erase me again. He made his choice. Together with Lucas, he seized the auxiliary chains and hauled, forcing them tighter. The vault groaned, the eye blazing from the crack. Ethan shouted into the storm of sound. Hold on, Grandma. Just hold on. Holt's voice cut through the din. If that door opens, we all die. Ethan turned, teeth clenched. Then maybe the world deserves to know what we've done. The deck shook, alarms howled. Somewhere deep inside the vault, a scream rose, a sound like metal tearing and water boiling at once. The air pressed down, suffocating. Ethan felt his knees buckle. And then abruptly silence. Vault still, the eye closed. The chains hung slack, everything inside had fallen asleep. Holt lowered his gun, breathing hard. Containment destabilized. But Ethan knew better. Sarah Caldwell had not surrendered. She was waiting. That night in the dim quiet of the mess, Navarro sat across from Ethan and Lucas. Her bandaged arm trembled faintly as she poured coffee. DAR will never forgive us for what happened today, but the files are out. There will be questions, inquiries, maybe even justice. Lucas sipped his coffee like it was victory champagne, assuming they don't erase us first. Ethan stared into his mug, hearing his grandmother's last words. He wasn't sure if they had been a plea, warning, or threat. All he knew was that the vault still pulsed in the dark, waiting for its next chance. Navarro's gaze met his. Whatever happens, Caldwell, remember this. We chose to act. That matters, don't forget it. Ethan nodded, though unease coiled in his gut. Acting was only the beginning. The countdown was far from over. Vault 13, Part 4. The SS Atlantic Warden limped south after the firefight, her deck scarred and crew shaken. Lowe's Angels loomed ahead, but docking would not mean safety. DAR's cutter still shadowed them, silent and predatory, a reminder that Marcus Holt's threat was no bluff. If containment faltered again, the Warden would be scuttled, its secrets drowned in every soul removed. Ethan Caldwell sat in his cabin, the encrypted drive heavy in his pocket. They had leaked the files, but doubt gnawed at him. Would the evidence reach the world intact? Or would DAR intercept and bury it as they had for decades? His grandmother's voice lingered in his skull, ragged but insistent. Find them. try to seize the vault before we reach Lowe's Angels. We need to decide where we stand. Stand, Lucas asked. Captain, they'll kill us if we resist. They'll kill us anyway, Navarro said flatly. If not by bullet, then by silence. Her eyes cut to Ethan. Caldwell, you're the fulcrum. Holt sees you as leverage. Your grandmother sees you as salvation. What do you see yourself as? Ethan swallowed. A witness, and the son of Sarah Caldwell. I won't let PAR erase her again. Navarro nodded once, then we fight. The plan was desperate. Lucas rigged decoy transmissions to confuse DAR trackers, sending ghost signals as if the warden's cargo had been offloaded mid-sea. Navarro coordinated with loyal crew to secure checkpoints. Ethan was tasked with guarding Vault 13 itself, a duty both unbearable and unavoidable. At 2300 hours, alarms blared. The cutter launched fast boats under cover of darkness. Figures in black grappled onto the deck, rifles gleaming. The warden's crew met them with fire hoses and wrenches in desperation. Gunfire cracked on the steel. The ship became a battlefield. Ethan crouched by the vault as shadows swarmed the cabin. Holt himself emerged, pistol raised, his voice cutting through the chaos. Caldwell, step aside. We don't know we're protected. Ethan's heart hammered. I know she's my grandmother. She was, Holt snarled. Now she's a weapon PAR failed to control. If she gets out, she'll bring the others, 30 more abominations. You'll unleash a war no one survives. The vault shuddered violently as if punctured with his words. A fissure split the steel with scarlet light pouring in. Chains snapped like cold spark. Sarah's voice screamed into his head. Ethan, blood of mine, captain. Holt advanced and moved. Navarro appeared from the flank, rifle level. He's not moving, you are. Gunfire erupted. Holt dove for cover. Agents surged forward. Ethan pressed his back to the vault, torn between fear and filial duty. The fissure widened. Through it, he glimpsed a face, gaunt, low, and human all at once. Eyes like burning coals, lips cracked, whispering, release me. His resolve wavered. For 60 years she had suffered, but it damned her to more. Lucas shouted from the rail, Ethan, don't. If she's out, we're finished. Navarro's voice thundered, contained. But Sarah's whisper cut deeper than both. Grandson, please. The deck became chaos incarnate. PAR agents clashed on the crew. Chains flew loose, sparks rained. Holt lunged toward the vault with a device in his hand. A pulsing charge designed to blow the container wide open. Navarro tackled it, the device skittering pulsing. It came to rest at Ethan's feet, blinking. He froze. One choice, one motion, could end 60 years of torment, or unleash something the world could never cage again. Sarah's face pressed against the crack. Tears or something like them streaked her cheeks. Ethan, she rasped, voice audible now, not just in his mind. Don't let me die in the dark. The blinking charge ticked down. 10 seconds. Ethan seized it, hands trembling. Lucas screamed his name. Holt roared in protest. Navarro's eyes locked on his, steady and unmoving. 987. The vault quaked. Bolts flew like shrapnel. The scarlet glow led brighter, painting Ethan's face. 654. He thought of the letter with warnings written decades ago. If they tell you I am alive, do not rejoice. 3-2. His grandmother's hand thrust through the gap, skeletal and luminous, reaching. 1. Ethan made his choice. The explosion never came. Instead, a thunderous boom rocked the deck, a shockwave knocking every man to the sleep. Smoke billowed and screams filled the night. When the haze cleared, the vault still stood, scarred, fractured, but unbroken. The charge lay in ruins, its energy devoured by something inside. Sarah's voice echoed in every skull on deck, crew and agent alike. Still awake, still starving, release me. Navarro dragged Ethan to his feet. We can't hold this forever, she growled. Either we finish it in Lowe's Angels or it finishes us. Ethan clutched his head, Sarah's cry ringing in his blood. The battle was not over. It was only beginning. The night dragged on, each second heavier than the last. Smoke lingered across the deck, mixing with the salt air, a haze that smelled of blood and burned steel. The crew gathered in battered clusters, patching wounds, whispering prayers, avoiding the sight of the black vault that still pulsed like a living heart. Ethan stood apart, his pulse pounding in rhythm with the container. He could feel his grandmother's presence, stronger now, more insistent. Her whispers overlapped, pleading, commanding, promising. Each syllable pressed behind his eyes until he thought his skull might split. Navarro barked orders, trying to reimpose discipline. Secure the deck, evacuate the wounded, double the watches. She turned to Holt, who knelt cuffed to the rail under two armed sailors. His smile, bloody but sharp, did not fade. You can't hold her, you never could. Navarro's glare could have cut steel. We'll hold long enough. Holt chuckled, spitting red onto the deck. You're deluding yourself. DAR built the vault to fail. Not today, not tomorrow, but eventually. It was never meant to last forever, just long enough for them to forget. Ethan stepped forward. Why keep her alive? Why not end it? Holt's gaze found his. Because your grandmother isn't just a prisoner, she's proof. Proof of what DAR achieved. Proof of what can be replicated. They'll never kill her, Caldwell. They'll just move her, box her, study her again and again. His voice dropped, venomous. And now that you've sent their files out into the world, they'll need her more than ever to control the story, to remind people why the subjects must remain buried. The words chilled Ethan. He imagined Sarah crated and shipped like contraband, dragged from port to port for eternity, her screams swallowed by steel, her humanity stripped to a warning label. He turned away, bile rising. Morning came pale and thin, sunlight creeping over the Pacific. Lowe's Angels grew on the horizon, cranes and skyscrapers stabbing into the sky. But the city did not look like salvation. It looked like another trap. Lucas found Ethan on the bow, staring at the distant shoreline. You look like you haven't slept in a year, the mechanic muttered. Feels longer, Ethan admitted. Lucas leaned against the rail. Navarro's talking with Port Authority. DAR wants the vault offloaded immediately. She's stalling, buying us time. Time for what? Lucas shrugged. For you to make a choice. You're the key here, Ethan. She knows it. Holt knows it. Hell, even that thing in the vault knows it. Ethan's hands clenched. She's not a thing. Lucas gave him a hard look. Then prove it. Decide what you're going to do for her. By the time they reached the berth, DAR's presence was unmistakable. Black SUVs lined the dock. Uniformed men and women stood in parade rest, weapons slung but ready. At their center waited Dr. Rachel Voss, her white coat flapping in the breeze. Unlike Holt, her expression carried no arrogance, only fatigue. Navarro met her at the gateway. You're early. You're late, Voss countered. Her eyes swept to Vault 13, then to Ethan. So this is the grandson. Ethan stiffened. You experimented on her, on all of them. Voss's eyes flickered. I wasn't there when it began, but I've studied them my entire career. And I'll tell you this, your grandmother is suffering in ways you can't imagine. If you love her, let us take her. We can ease it. Ease it? Ethan spat. You mean bury it again? Voss didn't answer, which was answer enough. That night, as the warden lay moored and tension coiled like wire, Navarro called Ethan and Lucas to her cabin. She locked the door, dimmed the lights, and placed a battered folder on the desk. This is the original logbook, she said. My predecessor smuggled it out from DAR archives. It details the creation of Project Erebus, dates, sites, subjects. It names everyone involved. If it ever sees daylight, DAR burns. Ethan opened the folder with trembling hands. Photographs slid free. Sarah in uniform standing tall and defiant. The early subjects in sterile chambers. Autopsy reports stamped classified. shuddered as if in anticipation. Cracks spiderwebbed across its face. Light leaked through in molten veins. Sarah's scream split the night, shaking Ethan to his core. Ethan, blood of mine, choose. He saw her face again, pressed to the crack, eyes blazing, teeth bare. Human and inhuman, his grandmother and a stranger. Navarro shouted, "Don't listen, focus." Lucas hurled a wrench, striking Holt and staggering him, but not enough. The charge on his chest pulsed brighter. Ethan's vision tunneled. The noise faded. There was only the vault, the scream, and the choice that had haunted him since the storm. Open the door and free her, or hold the line and bury her forever. Sarah's voice broke into sobs. "Don't let them keep me in the dark, Ethan. Don't let me die forgotten." His hand went to the chains. He felt them vibrating, ready to snap. His heart pounded with the echo of her plea. Navarro's eyes bored into him, silently begging him to resist. Holt grinned like a man already victorious. The world slowed. Ethan pulled. The chain links groaned, stretched beyond their limits, but Ethan did not let go. He felt every vibration, every scream of metal like tendons tearing at his own body. Sarah's hand reached through the widening gap, skeletal yet luminous, trembling with impossible strength. Lucas grabbed his shoulder, shouting in his ear, "Ethan, stop, you'll kill us all." Ethan's voice was hoarse. "I can't let her suffer anymore." Navarro lunged forward, slamming both her rifle against the chain. Sparks burst. Her eyes burned into his. "Caldwell, if you free her, DAR wins, not you, not her. DAR. They'll parade her, cage her again, and the rest of us will be ash on the bottom of the Pacific. Is that what you want for her legacy?" Ethan froze, torn between the plea in his grandmother's voice and the fury in Navarro's. The chain trembled, snapping one link at a time. He heard Holt laughing, the sound of a man watching damnation unfold. And then, in the middle of the storm of sound and light, Sarah's voice softened. Not the monstrous echo that filled his skull, but a whisper he remembered from childhood, when his mother had tucked him into bed with words she had learned from her own mother. "Be brave, Ethan, even if it means losing me." The words broke him. Tears blurred his vision. He let go of the chain. Navarro seized the moment. With a roar, she drove her rifle butt into Holt's chest, shattering the breech device. Sparks exploded, smoke filled the air. Holt screamed, collapsing against the rail. His agents faltered, confused. Crew surged forward, dragging Holt back, disarming him. The vault shuddered one last time, then fell still. The scarlet glow dimmed to embers. Sarah's hand slipped back into the darkness. Her final whisper echoed in Ethan's blood. "Thank you." Dawn crept over Lowe's Angels, the port bathed in muted gold. The warden, battered and scorched, eased into berth under escort. DAR vehicles crowded the dock, but the balance of power had shifted. The leaked files were already spreading, news outlets buzzing with whispers of immortal soldiers and forbidden experiments. Cameras flashed as reporters swarmed the perimeter. Navarro stood tall in the gangway, bandaged but unbound. "Let them see," she muttered. "Let the world ask questions DAR can't bury." Lucas limped beside her, muttering curses at the flashbulbs. "If they ask too many questions, we'll vanish." Ethan stood apart, the encrypted drive hidden close to his chest. He no longer heard Sarah's voice, but he felt her presence like a heartbeat, faint but enduring. He looked at the vault one last time. The chains were reinforced, the steel scarred but closed. It was both coffin and cradle, curse and testament. Navarro's hand touched his shoulder. "It isn't over. DAR won't stop." "I know," Ethan said quietly, "but neither will we." Vault 13, Part 5. The SS Atlantic final leg south was no voyage at all. It was a vigil. The ship crawled along the coast under escort, its crew gone from sleepless nights, its deck still scarred from fire and gunfire. And still the vault wavered, scarred, chained, but silent. For now. Ethan Caldwell moved through the ship like a ghost. The encrypted drive remained hidden against his chest. times it was no more than a sigh that stirred at the edges of his mind. Other times it was the whispering memory, lullabies he had never heard but his mother must have, words of comfort warped by 60 years of torment. Ethan could not decide if they were real or just what he needed to hear. By the time they reached San Diego, the air above the harbor was thick with helicopters. News cameras tracked their every move. DAR convoys massed along the dock, and waiting among them, calm and sharp as a knife, stood Dr. Alan Pierce, one of the program's architects. Older now, his hair silver, but his eyes bright with the hunger of unfinished work. Navarro met him at the gangway. "You won't take it," she said before he could speak. Pierce smiled as he ignored the child. "It isn't yours to give or withhold. The vault belongs to DAR. Navarro's too tight. Not anymore. The files are out. Knows. Knows enough to be afraid," Pierce countered. "And fear serves us well. We'll control the narrative. We always do." His gaze shifted to Ethan. "The grandson I've been waiting to meet." Ethan bristled. "I know what you did to her, to all of them." "And you're welcome," Pierce said without shame. "Your grandmother gave humanity a future, an unkillable soldier, a weapon no enemy can match. She should be honored." Ethan's fists clenched. "She begged me for the least." Pierce's smile cooled. "That's the hunger speaking, not the woman. Don't confuse them." The standoff stretched into days. DAR demanded the vault surrender. Navarro refused. Politicians circled like vultures, terrified of the truth, desperate to contain the scandal. Reporters screamed questions from the shore. The crew grew restless, caught between duty and survival. It was Holt, shackled below, who forced the final reckoning. He escaped his bonds with help from a bribed guard, leaving 2 sailors bleeding in the brig. By nightfall, he had reached the deck, weapon in hand, and made straight for the vault. Ethan intercepted him on the catwalk. The Pacific roared blackly. The vault moved at their side like a second horizon. Holt's face was a mask of fanatic clarity. "You can't protect her forever," he hissed. "Better to end it now. One bullet, one blast, and she's gone, and so is the threat." Ethan stood firm. "She's not a threat, she's my grandmother." "She's both," Holt spat, "and you know it." The vault shuddered as if to agree. A deep groan echoed through the hall. Letters sealed themselves into the screen, glowing white on its black. Ethan, last chance. Sarah's voice filled, warm and terrible. "Free me or let me die, but do not leave me in the dark." Holt raised his gun. Navarro shouted from the bridge wind. Lucas came running with a wrenched teeth bare. The crew froze, watching history battle months later, a fisherman off the Oregon coast found something tangled in his nets. Not fish, not debris, but a figure. A man impossibly tall, with skin marked with blue veins, his eyes sharp with intelligence. He spoke no word, only smiled. On his wrist was a faded tattoo, Subject 30, Victor Kane. And then he vanished into the Pacific, swimming faster than any living fish. The world had thought Vault 13 was the end. It was only the beginning. The silence after Earth's fall was more terrible than the gunfire. Waves lapped against the hull far below, their rhythm slow and endless, as if mocking the chaos that had unfolded above. Crew members shifted uncertain, their weapons still raised, their breaths steaming in the cold night. Navarro lowered her rifle at last, her face unreadable. Ethan leaned against the vault, his palms flat on the scarred steel. The glow had faded completely. No more whispers clawed at his skull. No more burning eye peered out through the seams. Only silence, hollow, definitive. His grandmother was gone, freed, or extinguished. He could not decide which word hurt more. Lucas came to his side, gripping his shoulder. "It's over," he said, but the tremor in his voice betrayed the lie. It was not over. The battle had ended, but the war had only shifted its shape. At dawn, DAR made its final move. Dr. Alan Pierce boarded under heavy guard, his expression taut with fury and disbelief. He strode across the deck like a man marching to a pulpit. "You've doomed us all," he declared, his voice echoing across the gathered crew. "Do you realize what you've done? Subject 9 was stable, contained. You've destroyed 60 years of work." 60 years of torture, Ethan shot back. His throat was raw, but the words came steady. "She wasn't a subject. She was a woman, my grandmother, and she's free now." Pierce's eyes glittered with cold rage. "You call that freedom? You've erased the only chance we had to understand what we created. The others, Subject 30, Subject 17, all of them will come. And when they do, you'll wish you still had her to stand against them." Navarro stepped forward, rifle slung across her back, her bandaged arm trembling slightly. "Enough. You're finished, Pierce. The files are out. The inquiry has already begun. The world knows." Pierce sneered. "The world knows fragments, rumors, fear. DAR will control the narrative as we always have. You can't stop the machine." Ethan's hand closed around the encrypted drive at his chest. He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "No machine lasts forever, not when the truth cuts through." For the first time, Pierce faltered. His face tight, his gaze flicked to the vault as if expecting it to answer. But it remained silent, indifferent to its maker. Finally, Pierce turned and left, his guards falling in behind him. His words lingered like poison in the air. The warden limped into San Diego Harbor under the glare of global attention. Cameras lined the piers, helicopters thrummed overhead, reporters shouted questions through bullhorns. Navarro held her head high as she led the battered crew down the gangway. Lucas muttered curses at the press, ducking his head. Ethan followed, the drive hidden under his jacket, his face pale but resolute. Officials swarmed the ship. Investigators seized Holt's remaining agents. DAR tried to impose silence, but too many eyes watched, too many microphones pressed close. The files Ethan and Lucas had leaked spread faster than fire. Within days, headlines screamed across the globe. "Immortal soldiers, Project Erebus exposed, Pentagon's darkest secret." Public outrage surged. Congressional hearings raged. DAR was dragged into the light, kicking and clawing. The warden's voyage became a touchstone for debates about ethics, power, and the cost of survival. Navarro testified before committees, her voice steady, her defiance unshaken. Lucas vanished into quiet exile, but whispers of his role traveled through the docks and yards, a legend among sailors. Ethan was summoned too. Before cameras, under harsh lights, he told the story. The eye in the vault, the words carved in steel, the voice of his grandmother begging not for vengeance but for release. He ended simply. She was a soldier who gave her life once for her country. They took like 60 more years from her. That debt can never be repaid, but it must never be repeated. The room had fallen silent. For a moment, Ethan believed change was possible. Yet change is never simple. Months later, DAR still moved in shadows. Lawsuits dragged. Funds were promised but delayed. Families of lost subjects demanded more than apologies. Governments whispered of weapons too powerful to abandon. And through it all, Ethan carried the weight of the drive, the logbook, and the silence of the vault. Sometimes in dreams he heard her again, not pleading, not raging, simply present as though watching. He woke with tears he could not explain. Navarro remained by his side, a sentinel who had given up her command but not her resolve. Together, they tracked rumors, unmarked ships sighted in remote ports, facilities shuttered in deserts and mountains. 30 names lingered in Ethan's mind like unfinished prayers. Sarah had not been the last. She had only been the first he met. Epilogue. 3 months after the warden's final voyage off the Oregon coast, a fisherman hauled in his nets. They sagged with something heavier than fish, something that moved. When the crew pulled it aboard, they recoiled. A man taller than any man should be, skin marked with faint bioluminescent veins, eyes glowing